Hello hero, it's Lucy Lanhorn. We're here for a new moon update. It's the important Scorpionic one, happening to within half an hour of you seeing this video if you are indeed watching it live, and thank you if you are watching it premiere. But if not, this reading may resonate for the time that you're seeing it in. For the live viewers, we're going to cover the period between the Scorpio new moon, mid-November of 2023, through the crescent moon of that period as well. And I will update you, if you are subscribed, at the half moon, the full moon, and then the last quarter for the same month. And we'll keep doing that in and out of months. So if you're not up for the sorts of random readings I do in between, that's absolutely fine, but it's worth a subscription to get these lunars. As I say, if you're watching at any other time, it could just be appropriate for the time that you're viewing, or maybe you're meant to stumble on me. You do you. And it will be a very general reading because I'm reading for a large audience. But if you want to get more specific, the best way to do that is through a booking, and the link is in the description. Now, first thing to say is technical. I don't know how the sound's going to be on this because my headphone jack is a little tricky right now. I think this is Spirit pushing me to get a good quality radio mic because we've had a few issues over the last few uploads. But I apologise if there is a disturbance in the force in any kind of way in that sense. With that bit said, there's quite a few channeled bits, so I'm going to sort of say those as we're shuffling. We don't normally use Bob in these readings, although he is prevalent on the channel, but we're going to today. So I don't know how that relates to you. You might be a Bob Ross fan, or it might just be that there's something in that card particularly relevant to your circumstances. But we are using the Caroline Mace, never know how to say it, archetype deck, the Tarot with the Divine, and my DIY Love Oracle, which doesn't need to be speaking to love circumstances, and indeed doesn't need to be speaking directly to you. This is just a way for me to get a more colloquial form of communication in the reading. If the messages do directly address you, that's absolutely great. But if they don't, I'll explain as we go on, right? Why is there a lemon on the table, Lucy? Why? Lemon wanted to take part. This reading is sponsored in part by the esoteric energy of Lemon, and I don't know why, right? I was cleaning up for this reading, despite the incense marks. Sorry about that. And basically the whole setup kind of fell off itself, and my message from Spirit was the reason for that, was that Lemon wants to be involved in some way. Sorry guys, just taking a minute. Right, it's this one. Again, come on. Right, that does hone in on the Lemon stuff. So I was like, why does Lemon want to be involved? What's that got to do with anything? And I realised that instead of using soapy water, as I sometimes do to clean this table, I could have used my lemon cleansing wipes. So that's what needed to happen. And then I set up again, and then everything was fine. But this wanted to be a lemon instead of the crystal that I originally put out. So you may be working with lemons, you may be cooking with lemons, you may like the taste of lemon. There may be something to do with dyeing your hair lemon yellow or wearing lemon yellow. Indeed, I am wearing my House of Leaves sweatshirt, which I've dyed to be the colour of the back rooms and has a lemon undertone beneath the neutral. So it could be to do with the colour, but it will hit differently for everybody involved, right? Now, the other thing I want to show you, before this table gets even more cluttered, is an older edition of Parker's Astrology where foods and things like that have astrological attributions. I thought that lemon would fall under Gemini because of the colour, but it turns out that Aquarius is actually the place where citrus is super happy. So I don't know whether any of the other things on this page are relevant to you, but there might be an Aquarian thing here going on, or any of those symbols or images might just hit home as a confirmation for someone. I just feel drawn to show it. So look into Lemon, look into doing Lemon stuff. With us having the Exorcist archetype already coming up and everything sort of flying off in different directions, already something I'm getting is that some of you may need to do a lemon salt cleansing. It's been previously done on the channel. I can go into it in a mini video if you want, but it's also easily Googleable. It's just a way of drawing energy into a particular situation and then kind of rooting it, earthing it, and making sure that nothing dodgy can happen as a result. So yeah, lemon salt stuff might be a practice you're drawn to if you've been looking to cleanse, exercise, protect yourself from psychic attack. I know I've been dealing with a few gnats of late, and swatting those flies is sometimes made a little bit easier with lemon-based stuff. So if you're drawn to that, that's your message. Right, let's get more general, shall we? What else was I going to say? Oh, that was it. Right, so other things on the astrological bent. Esoteric Sky did a fantastic sort of summary of what this month may hold in terms of the Scorpio new moon onwards. So I'm going to link that in the description. I just feel like it will be relevant to some of you. I'm not entirely sure the context yet, but as we get into the reading, I guess we'll know. The other thing I've been told before we began was that my traffic light reading may be appropriate for you. So this is a try before you buy video of should you stop, get ready or go, and in what context and sort of how. And I have done, like I say, a free version of that on the channel, so I'll put that link in the description, but also you can book for a more specific one with me. It's one of the services I offer. So I think that's it in terms of housekeeping and stuff. Thank God, because that seemed like a lot this time. I don't know about you. I also feel very sort of tired, very sort of drained. And I'm not sure whether that speaks to the month or this sense of maybe needing a bit of extra protection for you. I have had a busy few days, but I don't think it's fully coming from me. So just bear that in mind. If you are feeling fatigued or a bit burnt out without explanation, this is your confirmation that there needs to be some protective or cleansing energy coming in. Because I do think of lemon cleaning products, but I also think of as we said, the lemon salt kind of uncrossing, shall we say. That's a nice light way of putting that word. Okay, so this day I am. Sorry guys, I'm very rambly. I think that's that tired energy, you know. Oh wow, we've got some humdingers in the... yeah, I may have to make this 18 plus because of the cards. Not to say that there's any sexual messages, it's just YouTube doesn't like certain words being visible. And I've had helpful people report me for that before, although I'm sure it was also to do with them having my best intentions at heart. So, right, we've already got a spicy one. We've got Exorcist in the upright, freeing yourself and others from destructive impulses. We've got a 3 of coins in the upright, 9 of coins reversed, Hierophant reversed, 6 of coins in the upright, Sun reversed, 8 of wands, King of wands, Page of cups reversed, Judgment. We've got an 8 of wands in the equivalency from the Bob Ross cards with the statement, now then, let's wash the old brush. That's the fun part of this whole technique. Shake off the excess and just beat the devil out of it. That seems relevant to this. We've got the activity of getting nostalgic. And then in the messaging cards, we've got, I don't think I'm over my ex. I'm so sorry. I fuck around a lot, but I'm willing to change. And I'm very codependent and don't want it to affect you. I'm going to sit with these for a moment and there'll be a cut which you won't feel. Okay gang, apologies if the camera drifts any. I'm doing my best, as indeed you are, judging by this reading. I think this is one about the people in your life and the direction that you are choosing to go at the moment, and how those two things may not be entirely simpatico. And I don't mean that in the sense of cutting out influences. But I think there's a call in this reading to moderate the content, interactions, and especially the words that are being passed around in the context of who it is that you would like to be and what it is that makes you happy, right? So we've already got this idea of lemon cleansing and this thing of the Exorcist, which speaks to the reading from Esoteric Sky that I reference, the astrological reading, because there was conversation there about minimizing, restructuring, and kind of feeling a call towards a grand Uranian change because of the stuff that's going on with Uranus at the moment, but what is more appropriate perhaps being a kind of pared down version of what already exists, right? There's a certain quality to the whole of this month, which is about accepting the resources that we currently have, bearing in mind the sort of scorpionic link with the house of resources, and deciding what it is that's already enough versus deciding what it is that's in excess. So if you think of a home where a hoarder lives, or where a person lives with people who have since moved out perhaps and left their belongings behind, that person may want to get out of that environment, and they may think that the best thing for them is to be in a new place or to do some traveling or whatever it is. But what might actually be best for them is just to consolidate the belongings that were already in their surroundings and kind of out with the old. And then it may be that they're quite happy to be in that space. You know, it's just that other energies have been impeding on what it is that's happening here. And I think, you know, as it seems to be in different ways every month, you've gone through a process of self-evaluation recently. You've come to a kind of a decision, perhaps, which is why you're turning to tarot for the next step. But I feel that there's stuff giving that an accent which isn't yours, right? Sometimes literally for some of you, I'm hearing that somebody with an accent that is not your own is being a big influence on that, whether that's within your own family or whether that's friends, or I don't know. But there's something here about somebody who sounds unfamiliar to you having a very large influence on what you want to do next, perhaps maybe being someone you look up to, but their advice or their input is not 100% useful at the moment. So something there, right? And if that's me, because you're not a Brit or whatever, that's absolutely fine. But what I would say is take what I've said so far and take the links, and then, you know, blessings as you go to wherever you're going, okay? What do I want to say? I think you've been drawn into something. One particular relationship is pulling out, but it's also just a general dynamic in an interpersonal way, which is surprising because the suits are not necessarily interpersonal, but we'll get to that. I think you don't want to be on your own, right? With this 9 of coins in reverse, I think you don't want to be left to your own devices necessarily. This is making me think, because of the imagery on the card, of someone I know that is very self-driven, very sort of solo, but also listens to the little birdies around them a little too often, right? And I think that's you. I think you are managing your own affairs very well at the moment. You know, there's a lot of abundance here. There's the watermelon, which is kind of fertility and plenitude and always having enough to eat. It's also, in my part of the world, quite a luxurious thing to eat. And it's sort of that thankfulness for the global quality of things as it stands, the interconnectedness, the availability of such kind of foods. Where I am, where, you know, it used to be just turnips and nothing else. So there's something to do with that relationship to the international coming in here as well, or to the global, to the globally abundant, maybe even to a resource like YouTube coming in. But as much as you're mastering everything very well, there is this sense that, I don't know whether someone near you is telling you that you don't want to be alone, but there's this like fear of having to do something on your own. And that can apply even if you're part of a couple or a grand friendship group, or you work with others or whatever, because there's some sphere within which you don't want to do it solo, right? Even if that's not like pervasive loneliness, it could just be in one area of your life, because again, general reading. And I think that because of this sense, firstly, you want to cooperate with other people, but I think you've been around a lot of people who wear masks, right? Possibly cluster B personality type stuff. I'm not a doctor, so, you know, see one if you need to. But there's certainly at least 2 figures in your life who I think have been very adept with subterfuge, and you've been very amiable with them. This person is sort of life of the party, very positive energy. And I don't think that's what they were bringing, but I think your response back to them was very kind, right? Possibly why Bob wants to be in the reading. there's something here about having seen those masks and having been a little bit taken aback by the way you've been treated in recent times, and that sort of re-influencing this idea of doing things on your own or being single. And that has pushed you towards people that you see as being unconventional in some way, or fighting against the current that you were in, the old self that you embodied, in a fashion that I don't think is entirely healthy. Now, that's not to say that pushing dogmas aside is not a healthy activity, because for many of us it is, and that's sometimes part of how exorcism works, and part of how space clearing and activities like KonMari and other minimalist things works, right? It's getting rid of the status quo by narrowing down the objects, people, resources, courses, whatever it is in your life. Plants for some of you, because I just hit Sarah Sanderson on the head. Isn't she looking great, by the way? Thank you for sending energy her way to those who I requested it from, because she was very, if you didn't see, she was covered in paint when I got her, and she was very tiny and ill, and I couldn't quite get the paint off. So anyway, there's something there. Yeah, so there's this draw to the unconventional, which is fine. Not a conventional person myself, all good. We like those energies. But I think that you've honed in on a specific individual, or maybe two, who embody those things in an outward way. And are maybe quite defiant, or indeed quite Aquarian, because we had that lemon stuff go on there. But I don't know that they're the best for you in terms of overall influence. And what I want to say is morally, right? I think that there's some kind of push from whoever it is you've been looking to do things differently, which is also not you. And the part of you that knows this and is just taking this reading as confirmation of stuff you already feel, perhaps feels even more isolated for the knowledge that somebody around you is not quite it either, right? There's something. It's like you've accepted with this Scorpio new moon that your current circumstances are not where you want to be. That's the feeling many of us are having. Great stuff. But also the direction in which you maybe saw yourself moving, or a person towards whom you saw yourself moving, is also not fully what you need. And I think there's maybe a bit of you freaking out of like, okay, well, can I find what I need? And that is bringing about an overall energy where you're a little afraid to free yourself from destructive impulses, or indeed to do the work to free others from that if you're in a healing modality. Because it's like, if that's not right, and that's not right, and that's not right, there is no Goldilocks and the Three Bears perfect option that you can settle into. So what you would end up doing is just sweeping out everything. And I think your fear, which also speaks to minimalism and some of the issues with it, is that there'd be nothing left, right? Minimalism is very, it's a wonderful paradigm, but it's also extremely ableist and very sort of dependent on having the financial resource and indeed the physical energy to use things in a certain way and live a certain lifestyle once excess is, swept out. And I think what you're feeling is something that I felt as a disabled person looking at minimalism, where it's like, okay, but if there's nothing left, what does a person like me specifically do with that, right? I feel drawn to saying this full example, so I will. With me, if there are fewer objects around me and I can't always leave my house physically, then that's the sort of ableist thing going on, where it's like, I'm not going to be happy with less, less entertainment, less stuff to look at. Whereas somebody who is very strong and capable and can do a lot of traveling without paying dramatic health insurance and all of these things might find it fantastic to only have, an iPhone and a spoon in their in their entire home. That for me is a nightmare. Speaking to the maximalist aesthetic, you may have noticed on the channel, but it's that kind of a thing going on with you energetically. And I don't mean to say that you're disabled or that the aesthetics of minimalism or the act of getting rid of objects has anything to do with this. It's just that it's a very useful metaphor of you kind of sweeping out connections or ways of speaking about other people, I'm hearing, or ways of conducting yourself in the world. And sort of when you get rid of certain influences, it's almost like, but what the fuck will I still have? Will I be going it alone? And what I want to say for this short time period is that may be a worry that you have over these several days, but I don't think it's the end of the story. And I'm not just saying this for subscribers, but I would encourage you to subscribe so that you get the rest of the details through the month of how this is going to go, because I think there's a broader picture unfolding. But what this reading is really speaking to is the fear of getting rid of stuff in order to start, right? It's like there's a cleansing that needs to happen, an exorcism in inverted commas that needs to happen, a space clearing for those who work with energy. But it's only after that point that we can really get to the crux of the matter. And I think for you specifically, this involves interpersonal stuff. The Six of Coins is interesting because it's an Alaskan fable within this deck, which is very folkloric. I think it's the woman who is kind to insects or something like that. But it's about having an attitude of total and radical kindness in order to spread the kind of energy that you want through the world and thus receive the kind of energy back that you would also want. It's somebody being long-term rewarded for them having an attitude of kindness in circumstances that would have made anybody else a little sour, right? And I think that you've been maybe drawn to people who are useful in some senses, but not necessarily kind. And what needs to be swept away for you is that unspiritual attitude. So a couple of examples. These may not be your exact circumstances, but they will hit for some. If you've been watching a lot of spiritual content, tarot readers, astrologers, adjacent disciplines, fantastic. I encourage you to be on that journey, clearly. Not all of it is kind. Not all of it is what we would call high vibrational, if you're happy with that sort of phrasing. I'm not a person who likes to call things positive, negative, and likes to say that you need to go on a media diet and all these sorts of things, because frankly, I see everything as holy, and I think that is a good spiritual attitude to have. But what I do think is that within this community, there can be people who read predominantly for conflict between humans, throwing around labels like karmics, labels like energy vampires, etc., etc. And then there are others who maybe do speak on those issues when it's needed, but who overall have a view to assisting you with your personal self-development rather than demonizing other people around you or coming in for the tea, the juicy gossip, the kind of how will this person be punished type stuff, instead of the work that you could be doing towards your divine purpose. Because in the end, success is the best revenge anyway. So for some of you, you've been absorbing a lot of info, which may have been correct info, but has had an angle on it which is not the most, I want to say, the most high, right? So some of you are religious as well as spiritual, but there is an energy that you needed to tap into informationally, but the expression of that energy was from people who have the priority of like a knee-jerk reaction to their stuff, you know, very clickbaity, very firing people up during the readings, etc., that is not appropriate for someone whose energy needs to be calm, kind, clear, and selective, right? So it may be stepping away temporarily from those kinds of things. Other example, you have seen somebody who is very outwardly rebellious, who has walked away from some of the structures in their life that you are realizing are not appropriate to your own life, or that have invited in some slightly nefarious energies. So you've gone to that person for information, advice, perhaps just inspiration, but that person actually doesn't speak of others well. They're not very kind in their regular interactions, or they're breaking away from something that you used to hold dear, actually comes from a kind of wounding. And I think that as you're getting further into that dynamic, perhaps you're seeing that it did come from a wound, or that there's something more to it there, where you may be correct with the energy of, yes, I also need to leave this behind, or I also need to be, you know, slightly more extroverted or bombastic or whatever it is. But actually the way that they've done it and the reasoning behind them doing it is not completely it for you. We're not feeling it, right? And again, Sky's astrological reading spoke about that impulse towards the Uranian not being fully the answer. Although it's playing out, it's not on a more personal level. It's not what's going on. It's an outer planet. It's broad scope influence. Whereas what needs to be focused on, particularly with a Scorpio moon, is your deep motivational factors, your deep needs, what it is in your life you want to protect. Because often Scorpionic energy, whether it's in the light or it's not so great, is protective, defensive, right? Putting up barriers, putting up warding, doing exorcisms, cleansings, finding out your deeper, darker motivations for stuff, positive shadow work, that kind of thing. So yeah, there's some kind of leaving behind of something that I want to say just isn't kind, or isn't vibing with where you are, right? Because the other thing coming through in this is that there is a call to something for you. You're realizing that your life needs to go in a very different direction, in a much broader major arcana way, right? This could be a vocation. It could be leaving a place that you've been all your life. All these kinds of things that are very big, broad issues, and that are almost too broad for me to cover adequately in a lunar reading, because moons, the lunar energy moves fast, right? It's temporary. But in sort of having that calling at the back of your mind, I think you're realizing what in your life doesn't quite align with it. And I think that this issue of exorcism or of cleansing or kind of swatting away the gnats sort of currently at you is small fry, really. It's more appropriate for a lunar. And what you need to have as the broader picture is this sort of divine judgment, divine calling, the idea of your eventual happiness with the sun being in reverse. Because when the sun's in reverse, it's delayed. It's not opposite land. It takes a little longer to get to that outcome with you. And I think the delay may actually be that this needs doing first, as I said, or that this needs taking care of with the understanding that this is a much smaller issue than who you want to be. And that is actually what's going to help you to take care of it. It's knowing that your predominant values are spirituality or kindness or focus on this vocational thing, or, you know, how am I going to be happy when I move on from this, that are going to provide the context for what you agree with about this Hierophant figure and what you don't agree with. This could even be a mentor that you're sort of gradually rejecting the energy of. And I don't mean that in the sense that they don't impart useful information, so much as I'm learning a lot from you, but I don't necessarily want to be the person that you are. And that's a really healthy spiritual stage, actually, because quite often early on the journey, what we tend to do is 100% emulate whoever it is that we look up to. And we may find ourselves using similar phrases, or dressing a little like they do, or going down very similar pathways in terms of, you know, what qualifications they got when, and where they did stuff, and where they had their different experiences that had religiosity or whatever. And I think you're now graduating from that kind of mentality or mode, because you're very sure of who you are, which is the 9 of coins if it was in the upright. But in order to do that, there is almost a rejection of the elements that you don't like. There is a differentiation happening. And that's all exorcism is. It's just saying this stuff doesn't belong to this place. I'm going to send it back to where it does belong. You know, whether you believe in a more sort of Christianized, heaven and hell, polarized version of that, or whether it's more like spirit cleansings, where it's saying, hey, lost soul, I'm a fellow soul, I think you're in the wrong place. Or hey, energy, I recognise that you're from the other day where I got really angry and did a lot of annoyed painting, but it's time to clear out now because we're doing a different thing today. You know, those kinds of things. I'm very codependent, I don't want it to affect you, is, I think, an expression from whatever this energy is towards you. Now, I want to put the caveat in there that they may not be codependent. They may actually be hyper-independent from what I can gather. Maybe a little too on their own, a little too shunning of more traditional values, shall we say. But I think that this speaks to this kind of interdependent relationship that you've possibly had with some of the steps they've taken in terms of following their examples, in terms of following in their footsteps in some way in your own life, and how that might carry utility, right? So there's a kind of risk here that Spirit is nudging you towards, of being too reliant on the way that somebody else has done a thing, because you know that the thing they've done would also be beneficial for you. I hope that's making any kind of sense. I don't think I'm over my ex, I'm so sorry, and I fuck around a lot, but I'm willing to change. I think these are more kind of your energy. And I don't mean that in a sexual behaviour sense, although take it if it hits. I think this is you, excuse me, hiccups confirmation. This is you getting into the energy of knowing what destructive impulses you have with this freeing yourself of destructive impulse card, and kind of realizing the changes that need to be made, pulling yourself into a willingness to make those changes, and understanding how they relate to your past, you know, symbolized by this idea of the ex. Whether or not your ex is remotely relevant here doesn't have to be at all. But it's the idea of the things left behind, the things coming up, and having a happy medium between what to carry forward and what not to. I think we sort of covered the sun in reverse, but this is just saying, if you haven't felt happy, you can be very happy. Life can be a lot more exciting. With this being such a major god as well, life can be more demonstrative and of greater import for you. If you've been feeling like you're picking up on signals, but they may be from the static, or the changes that you made are a bit low level, or there's just something kind of not pushing forward fast enough for you, I think this is saying that's all going to happen probably pretty soon with this. But there's an understanding that needs to be reached first of like, well, where do you want to go? What are you prepared to get rid of in the journey of wanting to go there, without stepping into this Uranian instability of I'm going to completely get rid of this because this person did, and I'm going to lose everything that I did have, in a kind of, you know, like I said earlier with the minimalism thing, like clearing too much out and then realizing, oh, I actually needed that, or oh, I work differently to other people, so this wouldn't be good for me, right? There's definitely a process going on in these first few days of, I know I need to sweep all this stuff out and cleanse and defend, maybe Scorpionic and Lemony, but it's like I need to do that under the paradigm of the person I want to be, not the person that I am right now, irritated by whatever and sort of a bit anxious to get started, to get going. It's like you're in a car and the key's in the ignition and you sort of turn it, but then you turn it off because you're like, I don't know about this journey, you know? And what I want to say is start driving and it's going to become clear on the drive, right? But I think also there's a thing of, there's too many objects in the car right now, or there's too many voices talking over you about where it is that you want to go. That Tweety bird here, I don't know why I call it Tweety, but you know, it's equivalent to people in the passenger seat sort of in your ear. And this is your journey, right? They may have wonderful things to tell you. They may be very useful. There is a collaborative energy going on, even with people that you don't take all the way here, or even with people that you know are wearing masks. there is always utility to all the connections we have in our life, because in many paradigms we invite them in. Sorry to break it to you. But also, sometimes we can recognise that although someone breaking from convention is great, other things about them may not be great. Eight of Wands, I think you're going to get swift movement forward once you kind of realise this. I also think you might get swift communication from one of the people or energies or in one of the modes that you are wanting to reject right now, that you are pulled to cleanse out, right? I think, you know, maybe even if you're kind of minimizing contact with a certain person, or you're getting rid of certain objects associated with a thing, or you've dropped out of a group you go to or something like that, there's like an energy of dropping something and then immediately within these few days having contact coming in regarding that thing or from that thing or in that energy. So like, I don't know, you're stepping away from a parent who always speaks ill of others, right? As an adult child, you're like, I respect you as a parent, but I need to go my own way and sort of do that influence as a minimum, say. And immediately after making that decision, even though you haven't done anything to sort of step back and maybe reduce contact slightly, you get 10 calls from that parent and then, you know, several text messages describing that they want to bitch about their friend or their neighbour or something like that. It's that echo of the energy that you've just got rid of. The example that Spirit is giving me is in the Scream movies, and indeed in horror in general, but it was pointed out in the last Scream movie as like a trope, where you always have to double kill the killer because they'll sit up and come back otherwise, right? It's the double tap thing, like the Zombieland thing as well. Because you'll go for the head and then they'll still sit up and they'll still chase you the rest of the way. So there's an idea of exercising a certain influence, space clearing, doing all your positive ritual work or inner work or whatever it is that you do in this sort of full moon stage. And then as we're getting, new moon stage. And then as we're getting into the crescent energies, it's like, jobs are good. And then suddenly the thing that you were trying to get rid of sits back up and starts talking, right? It's like a Deadite vibe. So I think this is nothing to be afraid of or nothing that you can't handle, but it's just a heads up that like, as soon as you have cleared this out, I think it's going to rear its head in some way. And that sometimes is either an indication to do your clearing in a different fashion, which speaks to me with the lemon thing, because that's not the only way that I get rid of energies, but it's maybe the first thing I do because it's quite light. And if I don't know the intentions towards me fully, it's a kinder way of doing stuff than maybe some of the blitzing that I would do energetically if things are fired at me more than that, right? So I think maybe what's happening here is that you're taking tentative steps, you're getting a clap back, and then the universe is sort of showing you through that of like, no, we need to be stronger in this. We need to make sure that we're asserting ourselves in a more direct, boundaried way. And I think that with this King of Wands as well, that sort of, I mean, these two have a relationship. They're both birds. They're both looking sort of towards each other, and they're both in the same suit. And I think the King of Wands perhaps represents somebody who's in a shadow fire kind of energy. So arrogance, anger, rushing into things too fast, being too bombastic, being sort of obnoxious or loud, taking over the conversation, taking over matters in general. You know, it's very sort of shadow emperor kind of a vibe in their relationship to you, or the way that they try to come back, if indeed this is a person. And if it's not a person and you're just kind of trying to get rid of a bad habit that's come to the fore for you, or some kind of temptation, some kind of energetic relationship to something, I think, again, there is going to be a clapback from that thing, or a resurgence, or a final like, are you sure you don't want to do this anymore? Just so that you can be in your power enough to say, yeah, I'm doubly sure now, thank you, right? Which is the correct response, by the way. If you get that second attack, the spiritual response to it is, oh, great, thanks for clarifying. I needed to go bigger, I needed to go harder, or I needed to be super sure that I'd made the right decision because I was listening a lot to the people around me before. And I didn't know until you were even more negative in my direction that getting rid of that in the first place was going to be the right move, right? And it doesn't have to be interpersonal. It doesn't have to be a person that you're stepping away from, but it's just a good example of how that energy functions, where you kind of put it out there that you're stepping away from something, and that thing gets butthurt in an energetic way and fires back at you to go, are you sure? Are you sure? I think this is, it's a big few days. This reading is a lot longer than my lunars usually are, right? But it's because you're coming into your own power, you're evaluating who it is that you want to become, and getting rid of sort of small fry energy to reclaim that power. But I think as you do that, the things that you're seeking to lose will come back. And if this is like a really simple example of like, you are house clearing, you're literally getting rid of objects, it could be that, you know, you get rid of a load of baking stuff, and then there's some reason over the next few days that you need to bake again. But you still come to the thing of, oh, actually, I can borrow that off a neighbour, or I only need this and this, and it was still a good idea, right? So this energy can express itself through lots of different circumstances, but it is that principle of, no, you are doing the right thing. And I think, you know, it's important to reiterate that when you were doing the quote-unquote wrong thing, or the wrong thing for you, it was because you didn't want to function with this stuff alone. It was out of some kind of fear that you would be doing everything solo for the rest of your life in that particular realm, or making the decisions for everybody else in a certain way. And you were just like, can life just ease up? Can something take this off my back for a second? Whether it be spirit or family members or friends or whatever. And I think that led you down some avenues that perhaps are not the healthiest for you. But in doing that, it's kind of shown you far more clearly, and clarity is another lemon property, right? That the way you were going there is not quite it. So it's a really illuminating few days. It's lovely. But I think it might be, you know, whenever you're clearing up, you have to get your hands dirty, don't you? And whenever you're deciding what to leave behind, you have to come up against the idea that those things or people or energies might not be 100% okay with being left behind, which I think is also this, I don't think I'm over my ex bit, or I'm very codependent. It's that expression of the dynamic between two things on a purely energetic level. Page of Cups in reverse, I think, relates to this judgment, and we've talked about judgment being a call, a vocation, a pull towards a path that is the greater you, the bigger picture. Scorpio is sometimes symbolized by the eagle as well as the scorpion, and the eagle is, you know, internationally a symbol of having a broader view, rising above the way that everyone else sees things in order to see a really huge picture and then hone in on your prey or your goals in a particular way. Something that Scorpio can be very good at, but is sort of more infamous for using in the shadow, if you like, just because pop astrology is a jerk, right? Pop astrological understandings quite often mistype and stereotype Scorpionic stuff to be very negative, defensive, hypersexual, possessive, all these kinds of things, when actually what is often going on underneath those things is a way of seeing the larger view, and then, as I say, honing in on some particular focus in a way that doesn't go well if it's fear-based, but goes exceptionally well if it's sort of carried out in the light with all of those same skills. So there's a sense of the big picture here. And I think the Page of Cups in reverse speaks to, in terms of suit, it speaks to that inversion of water and the kind of bad reputation of water signs sometimes, to be overly emotional or to be behaviourally reactive in that very sort of famously Scorpionic fashion. And I want you to, I'm hearing, I don't give a damn about my bad reputation, right? So I want you to turn that on its head and say, sometimes these things that people don't like much, like possessiveness or jealousy or envy, you know, or defensiveness and blocking off people and all these sorts of behaviours, are actually to serve the higher good of the individual in a really effective way. When I use the example of jealousy, which is a very famously Scorpionic characteristic, jealousy shows you what in other people it is that you want that you didn't realise you needed until you saw them having it. So that could be something for you that's really relevant at this time. There is always a more beneficial side to whatever's going on with a person. So it speaks to that, but also the Page of Cups in reverse. It's like a lack of imagination, but I don't think that's, I think you are very imaginative right now. I think you're allowing yourself to dream about the kind of future that you would have perhaps without these influences or on this new path. And I think instead this speaks to how up until the stage that we get to the Page of Cups and we get to the calling, you've perhaps let things inhibit your ability to dream. I'm now seeing Tom Hardy in Inception, where he pulls out the massive gun and says, don't be afraid to dream a little bigger, right? And again, very Scorpionic, Mars ruled kind of analogy, right? But it's this idea of having held yourself back. I'm now hearing push the button and don't hold back, right? It's, yeah, I think the way to know what to get rid of is to look at what has inhibited you thus far. And again, what is spiritually unkind to do. So the other thing about this is that it will hold you back in terms of dreaming, imagining, visualizing your future if you don't go about the exorcism or the replenishing of yourself in a way that is kind to everybody involved, including energies that you might leave in the past. So some of this, again, first few days, it's only a few days, there's a lot going on, but some of it will be spent solo, trying to figure out how is it going to be kindest to these people, these energies, these things, to release them back into the wild, to pass them on to a local charity shop if it's objects, to, you know, just kind of cut cords, cut ties with whatever it is, without them feeling what I used to feel, you know, this 9 in the reverse, and the worry that abundance won't be there, the worry that you will be doing everything on your own. So yeah, I think it's a huge time for you. There's a lot of consolidation and stuff, as Sky said, but there's also a lot of deciding how to make a process like an exorcism into a kind and calm thing, which I think lemon balances very well, because it's often, I mean, it's citrus, so in aromatherapy it would be enlivening and happy making, but at the same time it is a cleansing factor. It gets rid of stuff as well. So yeah, there's those two things going on really well together. With the 8 of Wands for the Bob clarifier, I think, again, I mean, you've had 8 of Wands here. This is just saying there will be that swift movement, there will be that progress. And the message, really, the bit that leaps out to me is beat the devil out of it, right? Get rid of the temptations, get rid of the excesses, the bad habits, the destructive impulses, the negative energies, the conversations about what other people are doing all the time. The sort of, just the negs, get rid of the negs, guys. And with getting nostalgic, it says, write a list of your top 10 all-time movies. Try to induce some feel-good films and comedies, then grab the popcorn and press play. I am a cinephile, so I will, like, this is biased coming from me, but I do think going back to the films that made you and figuring out why under a new lens is often a very spiritual pursuit. Indeed, there have been very spiritual books written on the topic, if you're interested. I'm trying to think of the title of one of them. If I remember it, I'll put it in the description, but I may not, but look into that if you vibe with that. For some of you, and I say some because it doesn't tend to be that it Venn diagrams with spiritual audiences often, but if you are also a horror fan, you may find utility in House of Psychotic Women, which is, I think she calls it an autobiographical topography of insane women in horror movies. And it's a very moving account of one person's journey through her own sanity and her own very difficult experiences through watching the portrayal in kind of exploitation 70s stuff of other women, in inverted commas, going nuts. And I deliberately use ableist language when I say this because a lot of it is very sort of like that, right? The media is very misunderstood, but she finds a healing process in it that I think is really interesting. So that might be relevant for some. If not, I think, yeah, go to the movies, the music, the influences that made you, get nostalgic about those things, but pull from them what is relevant to this judgment. For some of you, you want to take a new career path. Okay, what is it about, I don't know, John Hughes movies that you loved as a kid that speaks to that career? Even if it's completely the other side of the spectrum of things, there will be something that you can pull anew in your kind of downtime within these few days. If it's a relationship, maybe you had certain movie crushes, maybe going back to those movies might impart some kind of wisdom about what it is that you're looking for, or what you used to look for that is no longer a useful type, that needs exercising, cleansing. Even if it's an aesthetic thing, you know, going to stuff you do love in order to get rid of stuff in your house that you don't, that doesn't fire you up, that can't continue with you on the journey of you being the main character and director and operant power of your own existence, right? And this goes particularly if those films are very sort of light-hearted and don't have wisdom in them. Again, I think that's bollocks. I think everything does. Because going to those things and just pulling the non-obvious from them is sometimes a greater way of messaging you directly from spirit than if you went to something which is, you know, quote unquote inspirational, hashtag inspirational, for everybody to get the same meaning out of it. Does that make sense? I hope it does. Let me know in the comments. Excuse me, I'm getting hiccups again because that bit was confirmed. So that is the message I was meant to give. I think that's your lot. And I say that knowing it's a very intense reading with a lot of different factors weighing in. And it seems like, gang, you've got a big job to do in this next few days. So I wish you the best with it. Stick to your values. Maybe even, if you've never written them down before, decide what your values are. Would you put truth over beauty? Would you put love over clarity? Would you put knowledge over playfulness? How do you balance who you are? And how does that differ to everyone around you, right? That might be a useful exercise. I think however you handle this, it's going to be a bit of an intense time, but you're going to come out of it knowing more where you want to go and also how you can keep your day-to-day mundane stuff or your deeply personal scorpionic stuff in good alignment with the broader process of becoming. Please subscribe if you liked this, like if you liked it, share with whoever you think may find it useful. I'm a small channel wanting to go big because I've read for many years, but not always on YouTube and not always regularly because we had a small teeny tiny pandemic going on and a lot has carried through, right? But if you do enjoy me, spread me far and wide. Subscribe for the next lunars because I do think these next 3 stages are going to be really important as well. And take care, guys. See you soon.